Hey, thanks for clicking on my channel. You're in for a big treat. Today I'm going to show you how to use a Tesla coil to generate free energy from the background vacuum of space-time itself. From the expansion of the universe, the cosmological constant dark energy will have quantum chromodynamics floating around in there, and you'll be off the grid and never have to worry about the power company again, and no, nothing of the sort. Today, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to continue on my quest to rebuild one of my existing dual resonant musical Tesla coils onto a more concrete frame, something more sturdy, to make it better looking, you know, generally speaking, to make it withstand travel. We may bring it to Burning Man this year if we go, not sure, but basically I just wanted to get back into coiling. Now, a couple notes about coiling. What I'm hoping is that in going through this process of taking this thing apart and then reassembling it, I can go through each piece logically and record and document what each part does and how you can make it work and how to debug it. Now, here's the thing about coiling. Over the last 10 years or so, I wouldn't consider myself one of the pros in coiling. There are guys who've done this a lot longer than I have. I've been into it for, this will be my 8th year coiling. Over 8 years, I've made probably 11 or so Tesla coils, everything from little spark gap coils to rotary spark gap coils, asynchronous, synchronous, different types of synchronous rotary spark gaps. I've done kits. There are kits out there you can buy. Eastern Voltage Research, Dan will sell you a kit. You can go on eBay and buy kits from people I don't know, and you know, I'm sure they're all wonderful products. What I found about coiling, as with any project to build something electronic and complex, something complex, is that 70% of it is building it in the first place and getting it to look like the instructions if you got a kit. If you don't have a kit, you're trying to get it to look like what you've seen on a YouTube video or what the bloggers tell you. And then 30% of it, and it's the 30% of the time that takes, you know, 30% of the work that takes is 70% of the time. 30% of it is debugging it. You know, when it's not working, how do you know it's not working? When you put all this stuff together, if you don't know what the pieces are supposed to do, how do you know? How do you fix it? That's the hardest part about Tesla coiling. These DR coils are especially diabolical because they've got a lot of different systems interacting. There are digital systems communicating over fiber, communicating with low voltage computerized systems using digital parts that are firing pulses into transformers that you wind yourself that are going into IGBTs that are charged up to, oh, you know, maybe 900 volts with a voltage doubler, blah, 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 blah. There's all this stuff. And if any one piece is not working, the whole thing doesn't work. And what do you want, really? Are you going to get free energy? No way. That doesn't exist. But what you're going to get is something that makes really cool sparks, and it's a great, you know, icebreaker, great way to meet people, maybe, or get thrown out of your neighborhood. In any case, having something that makes 14-foot lightning bolts that sing is always a way to impress people. Maybe it'll help you get your next job. Maybe, you know, impress the neighbors, and if you're lucky, they'll write books about your songs or something. In any case, that's what we want to try to do. So I'm taking apart an existing working DR Tesla coil. DR being dual resonant solid state Tesla coil. All the parts are solid state. The spark gap is actually not a spark gap. It's inside the electronics, inside the high voltage electronics. So you're not going to see any rotating tungsten with you know, bright sparks that look like a welding rod. None of that. All you're going to see is the sparks coming out of the top of the coil. And on my site here, I've got an example of some coils that I set off around Christmas playing some classical music in my driveway. My kid took the pictures with their iPhone, and you can get an idea of what sort of things you can do with this if you really get into it. That particular show used MIDI. I used MIDI on my Mac laptop running Digital Performer with a song that I digitized myself off a sheet of music, and maybe when I get the coil working we'll get into how to build an actual audio production. For now, we just want to get this coil to work. Where are we at now with the coil build? Let me bring you in and show you. All right, so it's been a while since the prior video. Just to remind you, here's the old coil. It's on a piece of you know, a nice box that I built. This wooden box that is simply a you know, bunch of I guess it's half-inch plywood here. Yeah, maybe 3/8" plywood that I got from Home Depot. I actually got it out of the scraps bin at Home Depot. Couple dollars worth of plywood, some dowels, some nice wheels on the bottom. I won't show you those. I won't bother showing you those. The wheels are way overkill. These wheels could probably hold a you could probably jack up a truck with these wheels. This thing isn't nearly that heavy. I've taken the secondary off, so there's no secondary on here anymore. I didn't want it to get in the way. It was kind of flopping around. But let's give you an idea of how the primary is set up. So what we have here is some 1/4" refrigeration tubing, regular old refrigeration tubing. You can get that at Home Depot or online somewhere. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns roughly of 1/4" refrigeration tubing. And if I get you in a little closer here, you can see that what I'm using as stanchions, let's see if I can get that into the picture. So the tubing is held by these things. Let's get around to the ones you can see here. These things. Now what this is a piece of, I believe this is G4 Garolite. You can get this from Amazon. You can get this from McMaster Car, Small Parts, which actually is Amazon nowadays, any of the supply houses. This stuff for coiling is fabulous. It is heat resistant, it's electrically neutral, you can zap it, nothing's going to happen to it. The issue with this stuff is it's like glass. Now it's a resin with some fiberglass in it, a very tough resin with fiberglass. When you try to cut this with a drill, you try to drill into it, you try to cut it with a jigsaw or regular saw, what you're going to find is it dulls the blades pretty substantially, because trying to cut through this glass, the glass is very abrasive and it dulls the high-speed steel almost instantly. So you gotta kind of use carbide to cut it correctly, or as I'm going to do today, I'm going to take a bigger piece of this stuff and I'm going to cut it with a tile saw. I found over the years that tile saw is exactly the correct device to cut this stuff. You don't need a diamond blade, you just need the usual typical type of tile saw you'd use to cut ceramic tile for your bathroom. I happen to have one of those. We've done a lot of construction work in this house, so I own a tile saw. I'm not suggesting you need to go out and rent a tile saw, but if you have access to one, it does two things. One is it's got the right cutting mechanism, the grinding mechanism, and it keeps the dust down with the liquid water spray. When this stuff is cut, it generates a dust that's evil. It's just pure evil. You don't want to breathe it in. You know, you want to wear a mask, a respirator, you want to wear goggles, you want to treat this stuff as if it is highly cancerous, because it is. So every time I cut this, I wind up looking like Walter White in Breaking Bad, because really you want to be covered up when you cut this stuff. Now, if you use a tile saw, you're in much better shape, because it'll keep the dust down and it'll cut smoothly. You don't have to make too many cuts. So I'll show you how to do that later. But as you can see, the shape we want, and you know, this is just, I hacked this thing together. I didn't work too hard on it. There's only 4 stanchions here. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4 go around. And I've cut holes in the edges here, 1/4" holes, actually probably slightly larger than a 1/4". There's a little play in that. And then I cut it off, not in the middle, but toward the top. So what I've got is a C-shaped indentation, and these particular pieces of coil just snap in and snap out. Actually, here, I'm going to show you one that it's kind of difficult to do, but there, you see? So if you cut the groove in there correctly, you can just snap these in and out, and that's pretty darn sturdy. You could turn this thing upside down, you could bang into it. Part of what you got to do geometrically is you got to make sure you get the right shaped holes. And I've got a piece here I'll show you. Okay. Here's a piece of scrap. It's my experimentation trying to get the holes correct. So I don't want a completely round hole like this one. What I want is something closer to this, where the hole is cut a little past the diameter, a little past the halfway mark, and that will allow it to snap onto these to the tubing itself. There are other ways to do it. You could cut this and just have a nice U shape. Like here's one here that's actually let's see, get that in there. Yeah. So this hole right here is actually a complete U. What happens is it goes around the tubing, but the tubing falls right out of that. Then you got to find some other way to secure it onto the stanchions. The idea is I want to create this Archimedes spiral here, and I want it to be as true to an Archimedes spiral as I can. So I cut these stanchions. In this case, I knew I had 5 turns. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grooves, and then what I did is I offset each of these stanchions so that by the time the tubing rotated around and came to the next turn fit into the subsequent hole. How do you do that? Well, what you do is you cut the grooves. You can cut these things to be identical, but you displace them outward. So you put one in, you displace this one out a little further, this one out a little further, that one out a little further. So essentially when the tubing comes around, the tubing that comes out of this first hole here actually lines up with the second hole here. And that's actually some fairly simple math. All you're doing is saying the distance between the center point on one turn and another, in this case is a 1/2 inch. This is 1/4 inch tubing spaced 1/4 inch apart. 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2. The center of this tubing is a 1/2 inch different than the center of that. Then the next turn is a 1/2 inch from the next turn. So all you got to do is you say, I'm going to take a 1/2 inch, and in this case I only have 4 of these. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch and I'm going to divide it by 4, and that's 1/8. 1/2 divided by 4 is 1/2 times 1/4 is 1/8. And so what you do is you say each of these has to be 1/8 inch further from the middle than the prior one. So I put this one in, I displace this one outward 1/8 of an inch, I displace this one outward. 1/8 plus 1/8 is 1/4 of an inch, I displace that one out 3/8 of an inch, and then when the tubing spirals around, it lines up correctly to fit in these grooves. If I had 6 stanchions, I would divide a 1/2 by a 1/6, and I'd get a 1/12. Each one would be moved out a 1/12. The exact same thing would happen. It's a very simple math. The idea, again, being is that you want to preserve this spiral the best you can. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to take these things. This is roughly a 1 by 6 inch piece of garolite. I'm going to cut holes in it, not like this. This is a demo, but I'm going to cut holes in it so that the grooves, the holes are going to be about the size of the tubing. In this case, I have 1/4 inch tubing. I'll cut a 1/4 inch hole. I'll cut it off so that I've got a little bit more than half left here. Then I'll bolt them down to the surface that I want, and I'll displace them in a fraction so that when I go all the way around, it equals the center to center distance of my tubing. Okay? Hopefully you can rewind that, and maybe I'll put some equations somewhere. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. Let me bring you in and show you the new coil, because I did some things off camera over the holiday. Here's the new one. And now let's get it. So down here now you can see I've got these cool insulators. I believe they came from telephone poles. These are kind of telephone pole insulators. They could probably insulate to like 300,000 volts or something. There's no need for anything like this. I could have used any sort of insulator. As you can see on the old one, I've got these Navy military ceramic stanchions that I got online, and you know, they kind of look cool. They got brass and they got the ceramic piece, and it has a certain look to it. That's fine. It's pretty retro. I think these things cost me like $5 a piece or something off of eBay. But I decided, being I'm building a new one, I wanted to try something a little different. So what I got was I found these insulators. Actually, I got them from a friend online. So there's 4 of them, and I bolted them onto this Garolite panel here. In a previous video, I explained how I made this box. Bolted them in there with these 7/16 by 18 threads. Low profile screws. I think what I'm going to do inevitably is, what I really want to do is countersink those, but if you look, the head is thicker than this, so really countersinking it, I'm not sure is feasible, but it would be nice if these things were invisible. I got to figure out how to make those invisible. What I'm going to do is put these stanchions on, and you know, I'm going to avoid the bolts for now. I'm going to put 6 of them on here, like so, all the way around. It'll look nicer with 6. I'm thinking this red looks good. I also have some green Garolite, but I think the red looks good against the copper. Again, there's a bit of architectural artistry you want here. You want this thing to look nice. I mean, it's all about, it doesn't do anything useful, so it should look cool, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I'll put 6 of them around. Again, if you go back to the prior videos, I explained the spacing. I believe the nearest in turn has got to be a 1/2 inch from the secondary, which will be here. On the secondary, I think I'm going to feed the center feed back to ground with perhaps this brass bar. This is kind of fun looking. I like that. It'd be a cool look. I think the main thing to keep in mind is, what you don't want to do is you don't want to create any metal loops, any complete metal loops. That will change the electrical functioning of the coil itself. So I don't want to create a big round metallic circle anywhere within the field of influence of this thing, or it's going to disturb the spark making. Now, one of the things you may notice is that this cabinet is one giant metallic loop. And if that starts to be a problem, I am going to insulate just one of these sides so it doesn't make contact. And in that way, this will just become a spark arrestor or a strike arrestor. I plan to ground this whole cabinet. Okay, so that's the theory. And the next step on this is to cut, let's see, I guess I need 4 more of these out of a sheet of Garolite, and then I'll drill it, and we'll mount the secondary on there. Or not secondary, primary on there. One other quick thing I wanted to show you is the dust that comes off of this when you drill it. I mean, you can use regular drill bits, and you're going to dull whatever cutting material you use on here. If you use a saw, it's going to get dull. If you use a drill, the bits are going to get dull. Just be prepared to go through drill bits. This stuff is like drilling through stone, right? So carbide is probably best. What you'll notice is you get this dust. And I've got it all over here because when I drilled through there, it made this kind of, I don't know if you can see that, it's sort of a red powdery dust. This stuff is vicious to inhale. You know, it's a silicate. You don't want to inhale it. It's, you know, I guess at worst you'll get black lung disease or one of those diseases where the silica particles can't be ejected from your lungs, and so they form lesions, and then you wind up with some really awful problems. So you know, by all means, when you're cutting this stuff, wear a mask, wear goggles. You know, you don't have to wear a Tyvek suit. You don't have to look like Walter White. But on the other hand, Walter White knew what the hell he was doing. So keep that in mind. Yeah, cheaper house, expensive area, that's what you get. Anyway, what I've done here is I've laid out some scribe lines on my piece of, it's a 3/8 inch foot square, 12-inch square piece of Garolite, and I'm going to cut it on this tile saw, and to make it easier, well, I'm just going to cut it into pieces first, and then I'll cut the holes in it on the mill. All right, so I'm going to go into Walter White mode here. What I'm going to do now is, there's really no technical reason I need to do this, but it'll make it look better in the long run. And what I found in building these coils is, if you try to keep the measurements precise, you're going to be off a little bit. But if you allow yourself to be off a little bit a lot of different times, then you wind up being off in your measurements a lot. So you should try your best to keep things level, to keep the holes evenly spaced. These stanchions that I made are not even. You know, cutting on the tile saw is an imperfect science. Tiles don't have to be that perfect. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the mill. I'm going to use this Cermet insert. I got this idea from Tom Lipton. I don't know how it's going to be cutting this Garolite, but I hope it works okay. I'm going to use coolant, not because I think it needs coolant, but because I want to keep the dust down. I've got this, got my heavy mask here. I don't think you're going to be able to hear me with this mask on, but this is how we're going to do it. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think I'm gonna give one more pass on this and smooth it out completely. So it's probably pretty fun to see the mess this thing makes. This debris comes off as a fine powder. Let me get you in here. This debris comes off as a fine powder, so you can see, you know, first of all, you've got this, which is, thanks to the coolant, it's you know, not airborne. I can wipe it off. This stuff is reasonably abrasive. Now, it's not like sandpaper. When you feel it, it's kind of mushy, but it does have an abrasive quality to it because it is fiberglass underneath. Let's see if I can get in a little further. You can see what it's done to my, and you can see the vise is, you know, just covered with this stuff. I'm gonna have to do a lot of cleaning. It's a pain in the neck to clean up this mess. What I'll wind up doing in the long run, because I'm going to have to do another setup, because I'm going to have to drill the holes, and the drills will make the same mess. But in any case, at this point, I've got this surface flat in parallel to this surface here. I used a, you know, they're not all exactly the same length. There's some differences. Sometimes looks like by 1/8 of an inch or so. I got it in there with a, you know, a piece of copper tubing, and so now what you have, at least these two faces here and here are parallel. It's not going to be the same length. I really don't care. They can be slightly off length. The length is not going to matter as much as the height when it comes to mounting the tubing on it. And then what we'll do is we'll drill the holes for the tubing, and then I'm going to drill and tap 2 screws on the back side so I can bolt it onto the surface there. Okay? All right. I couldn't resist. I whittle this down. Let's see. Let's get you in here. I braced the put in the vise, braced it with a clamp, and I whittled it down on the top edge here. So, in theory, of course, it made a massive mess. I mean, it's just pink dust everywhere. But let's take it off here. Now we're parallel on all 4 sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. Alright, so maybe now we can get the concept here. So I'll have 6 of these spaced at 60 degrees apart. 360 degrees divided by 6 is 60. Each of these will come up roughly to the edge. What we're going to do, I made a miscalculation. I've got 3/8 inch copper tubing, and I'm going to space the 3/8 inch copper tubing by another 3/8 apart. Not a quarter, so 3/8 apart. So 3/8 plus 3/8 is 6/8. 6/8 is 3/4. So each ring, each loop is going to be 3/4 of an inch away from the other ones. So I'm going to space the holes 3/4 of an inch apart for the copper tubing. And of course I've made that change in measurement, so I'm going to have to go back to Java TC and do a recalculation of the tuning point, but I suspect it's not going to be off that far because that really will only affect the turns slightly. So that's basically where we're headed for now. So the next step is going to be drill the holes in here for the tubing, and then drill and tap the bottom, drill the holes there, and space these so that they allow for the spiral. So that is, one will be there, the other one will be 3/4 divided by 6. 3/4 divided by 6 is 3/24. 3/24 is a 3/24 is an eighth. So each one of these will be an 1/8 inch further out than the prior one, until we get down to here. And so as the coil spirals around, the first turn will spiral around and land in the second spot. So that's how we'll do it. Okay.